We're going to talk about a methodology called the campaign method for more effective state government affairs. So when I first started lobbying, I just got out of law school at 40 years old. I was given a credit card by the Gates Corporation, and they said, "You're a lobbyist, go change the world." I had no idea what I was doing. If they knew what they were doing at the time, and this was incidentally, it was Gates Rubber Corporation, if they knew what they were doing at the time, they never would have hired me. But they did. And so I started going from state to state, getting beaten up and losing because I didn't know what I was doing. After a while, I came to an understanding, you know what? I used to be an engineer. And there's a methodology that one could put together here. And so put together this methodology called the campaign method. And the methodology rests on this. First of all, we're going to talk about what is this thing we call lobbying? Where do we do it? Why? When? Then we'll talk about what does it mean to be effective as a lobbyist. And it's a lot more than just talking to people. Because when we look at lobbying, we could have also a sense of certainty. And that is this, is all systems in lobbying, it's all about making a sale. And your threshold question in lobbying is this: why would that lawmaker give me his or her vote? Why would that lawmaker give me his or her vote? And until you can answer that question, you are probably not going to get the vote. And so you tailor it to their needs. It's all about making a sale. Secondly, the structure of state legislatures is all about the same. There's going to be two chambers. There's going to be a leader of the chamber. Like, it's basically all the same there. It's slightly different, but and then it's about lawmaker personalities. And one thing you'll observe in this course is much about psychology and the soul as it is about procedure. Because answering that question, why would that lawmaker give me his or her vote, knowing that it is a unique answer for every lawmaker. And one of the most foundational understandings to gain from this seminar is this: facts don't vote. Facts don't vote. Nobody cares what your facts are in the legislative process. It's all about doing the politics correctly. And so that's what we're going to learn today. So that's what effective lobbying is the realization, I've got a customer. That customer has something I want. Lawmaker's got to vote. What do I give to that customer in a purely legal way in order to get his or her vote? What are my opponents offering that same person to get their vote against me? So that's the essence of effective lobbying. Before we go to the legislature, you have to ask yourself, and we're taking this course from the perspective of moving a bill. Normally, it's vastly easier to kill a bill than it is to move a bill, depending upon the state. But we're taking from the perspective of before we go to the legislature and ask them to do something. Remember, it's not a fact-driven system. It's a politically driven system. So when we go to them, we have to ask ourselves, what is the likelihood that we're going to win? Because if we go to the legislature and ask them to do something and we don't have sufficient political horsepower, we can end up far worse than if we never went there at all. How do we build the campaign infrastructure? How do we write our bills and then those supporting materials? If you're going to be successful in the legislature, you're going to do a lot of writing. You're going to write the bills, you're going to write the fiscal note, you are going to write the bill summaries, you are going to do all that you can. You want to be a shadow to the legislative staff people with the attitude as you are there to help them out. How do we work with legislative staff? In those states that have significant staffs, such as Pennsylvania, such as New York, how do we work with those staff? Because really they're the ones who make most of the decisions with regard to whether legislation is going to go forward. In states that don't have personal staff, committee staff, professional committee staff, it becomes much more the lawmaker decided. How do we use the legislative procedure? Our bill starts at a point, and our bill makes it all the way to be codified in the laws of the state. So what are all of the steps along the way? Every one of those steps is an opportunity for your opponents to do mischief with your bill. So you have to be there for every committee hearing. You have to be there for every time it's on the floor. You have to be there. Your face has to be constantly seen in the legislature for them to even believe you care. And if they look around, and if you've worked with them and they're having a meeting and they look up and they don't see your face, the conclusion is they don't care. And if they don't care, why should we, the legislature, care? Your face is always there. Lobbyists don't get days off, they don't get sick days, and they don't get vacation days. During the session, you are there. How do we work with committees? How do we do proper testimony with a committee? And then how do we work with caucuses? In many states, the caucus is the true legislature. When you're sitting there in a committee meeting and you're watching the committee deliberation going back and forth, when you're up there in the gallery and you're watching what's taking place on the floor below, the game you're watching is not the game being played. There is a behind-the-scenes game being played, and that's where the bills are won and lost. And what you'll find, most committee meetings and most floor sessions are just theater. That's all they are, is theater, because the decision on that bill was made before anybody ever came into that committee room. How do we comply with the state ethics laws? You just can't go start talking to these people. You have to make sure that I have registered and I am in compliance with my statutes. How do we make our sine qua non campaign contributions? And those of you who are in law school, you may remember sine qua non means without it, you have nothing. And so campaign contributions are necessary, but they come in many ways. Dollars are just one form, and I will argue with you that they're the least effective form of influencing. The best campaign contributions are, would you like to come and see our facility? We would really like it if you would come on over and talk to our annual meeting. Those are vastly more successful campaign contributions than just writing another check. How do we get special interest support? Lawmakers are almost exclusively motivated by the special interests who put them in power and keep them in power. And the question is not what great set of facts you have. The question is going to be, what do the special interests want? Because they're the ones who put this person in power and keep them in power. And if the special interests don't like your bill, maybe they just don't like you. Your bill is going to die, regardless of what you have to say to them. How do we negotiate with them for consensus? In lobbying, consensus propels and controversy kills. So our job is to bring as much consensus as possible. Lawmakers don't like dealing with feuding groups. And many times the legislature will say, if you're feuding, we really don't want to talk to you until you have sat down and tried to resolve as much as you possibly could. And that's what we're going to learn in our negotiation exercise. How do we hire and work with contract lobbyists? Does anybody here use contract lobbyists? Okay. So some of you do. When those contract lobbyists, I'm going to show you how to find the right contract lobbyist, how to work more effectively with him or her in order to get the best result for your investment. How do we motivate the lawmakers? We're looking at their souls. What's going to motivate? This one's going to be motivated by politics in the sense that he or she wants to rise up higher in the party. This person is going to be motivated by doing the right thing. This person is going to be motivated by all kinds of different reasons. But you need to know the motivators. Why? Because what is lobbying? It's about selling. It's answering that question, that threshold question. Why would that lawmaker give me his or her vote? And until I can answer the question, I'm not going to get the vote. And I learned from that seminar that facts don't vote. So what am I going to do to persuade that person? So we have to know what motivates them. And then after we motivate them, we have to get and then keep their votes. This is a very volatile process. You may have the vote right now, and 5 minutes later, you don't have the vote anymore. So how do you get the vote? And then how do you keep that vote? And what do we do after that first all-important committee of subject matter jurisdiction, committee of first referral? When the clerk says, we're sending the bill HB 123 over to the committee on this or that, that is called the committee of first referral. They are the ones who are going to make recommendations to the floor on what they ought to do with your particular bill. Once you get it through the committee of first referral, the subject matter jurisdiction committee, you are on your way. There are going to be all kinds of people who are going to put amendments onto your bill because it's moving and they think your bill can move it across the finish line. So the question is, once we get it through that all-important committee of first referral, what are the follow-up steps? And again, we take this from the harder perspective, and that is moving something into law. However, constitutions at all of the states prohibit legislators from implementing anything. Implementation solely belongs to the regulatory agencies. And quite literally, this is what an agency will say. They receive a bill from the legislature, it's become law, it comes over to them. They can say this: we have no intention of implementing this law, and we are going to let the appropriation revert back to the general fund. What the legislature giveth, an executive agency can taketh away. And what the legislature wouldn't give you, an executive agency might. You don't have a law until the agency tells you you have a law. You don't know what the law says until the agency tells you what it says. And so 10% of laws are created by the legislature. 90% of laws are created by the regulatory agencies. So the next step in this process is to make our idea into day-to-day reality by working with the regulatory agencies. We'll start tomorrow with the constitutional foundations. Why do they exist? Who put them together and why? What does an agency look like? We're not talking about a Senate of 40 members. Now we're talking about agencies that have thousands of people potentially working for them. What kind of powers do they have? And what are the limits on their powers? For all practical purposes, the legislature can do anything they want to do, either to you or for you. But that's not true with the regulatory agencies. They are limited to the bounds assigned to them by the legislature in what's called the enabling legislation. How do we plan to talk to those decision makers in the regulatory agency? And then how do we do that face-to-face discussion with a person who's going to decide whether our idea will ever become law? Now, agencies are critical for all kinds of reasons, starting with this. They are, for all practical purposes, they are the technical staff to the legislature. Legislators, who are they? They're farmers, they're fishermen, they're hardware store owners, or lawyers, they're all kinds of people, right? And so you have a group of non-technical people being asked to create laws on very technical topics. How many microcuries per liter of radium ought to be allowed in groundwater? How many people have any idea what a picocurie even is? The agencies know all of that. So for all practical purposes, the agencies are technical staff to the legislature. So when you go have a committee meeting, the committee chair will look up and say to the agency staff person, well, Mary, what do you think about this? What does the department think? And so she makes a statement. But let's just say that they don't like what you did, but then the legislature says, okay, we're going to overrule with the agency. The agency says they don't like your bill, but we're going to go ahead and overrule it. At that point then, where does the bill go? After the bill gets through the legislature, where does the bill go? Who gets it next? The governor gets it. What's the first thing the governor does with the bill? He calls up the agency and says, what do you think I ought to do with this bill? And the agency says, I think you ought to veto it. The agency nominally works for the governor. And as a consequence, the governor's likely going to do what the agency tells it to do, and so your bill gets vetoed. These people are almost impossible to beat. But then you get to the next level. Your bill has been has been codified. It goes over to the department. Who makes the bill into day-to-day reality? The department does that. And the department says this: we have no intention of implementing this law, and we're going to let the appropriation revert back to the general fund. That's why I tell you, what the legislature giveth, an executive agency could taketh away. And what the legislature wouldn't give you, an executive agency would give you. They make 90% of the laws over there at the agency. So how do we do that face-to-face with those decision makers? The number one way that we impact our legal environment with the agency is through rule development and adoption, because those rules are promulgated by the department in order to create implementation of the law. How do we respond to one of these rules if we don't like it? We can do administrative appeal. We can do a judicial appeal. We can do to a legislative appeal. And so we will go full circle. We will start off with introducing your idea to the legislature. We'll go through the whole process. We don't get the rule that we like. So what do we do to fix that rule? We go back to the legislature to try to fix it. So that's going to be our ultimate appeal. And there's similarities between working with the legislature and working with the agencies. First of all, supporting materials. You will be doing a lot of writing for both agencies and for the legislature. You'll form coalitions. Agencies don't like fighting either among special interests. Same people you dealt with in the legislature, you're going to be dealing with over working with the agencies. You're going to have your interest group negotiations. But there's big differences between them as well. First of all, the agency is more technically driven. They're filled with PhDs. In fact, did you know that executive agencies on a national basis have 3 times the number of advanced degrees as you find in the private sector? There are 3 times as many PhDs and all those highly qualified people over the agencies than you'll find in general. And because they're very technical people, they are very open to hear what experts have to say. And there's going to be less politics. There are politics, but there's going to be less politics.